Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Dr. Lisa Wiedeman is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out her first appearance on episode 336 of Boundless Body Radio. Dr. Lisa Wiedeman is an optometric physician with over 30 years of experience. She was able to reverse skin and eating issues through the carnivore diet over 14 years ago and is thriving and looking better than ever at almost 60 years of age. She had suffered over 25 years of being addicted to sugar and processed foods and was only able to finally relieve herself of that misery once she realized it was a true addiction and abstinence was the answer via the carnivore way of life. Dr. Wiedeman became passionate to educate her patients that they could halt the progression of their macular degeneration with animal-based diets, and she has helped hundreds with their own carnivore diets. She combines her medical background, her 12 years of experience coaching others, her love of cooking healthy carnivore food, and her inquisitive mind to continue to learn and understand the benefits of exercise, sleep, sunshine, and lifestyle, to pass her knowledge on to anyone motivated to make a change and achieve optimal health. Dr. Lisa Wiedeman, what an honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks so much, Casey, for having me on again. I am, so passionate to just keep continuing to spread the word of so much success that, through my almost 14 and a half years now of eating a carnivore diet, I and coaching through most of that, can just see the build up that this has been going through because of so many successes of people really relieving themselves of serious health issues and, dropping weight, getting metabolically healthy, because that's really what it's all about, is getting metabolically healthy. And we want to try to prevent strokes, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, you name it. It's really important that we pay attention, because we're not told that we're committing slow suicide when we eat all that toxic poison. It's the sugars, the grains, the seed oils, the processed foods are just so incredibly addictive and so incredibly damaging over a period of time, because that's the big problem with this. With drugs, heroin, alcohol, you have a pretty immediate penalty when you overdo it, and you have a risk of killing somebody, dying, overdosing, all that. But with this whole sugar, carb, garbage food, standard American diet, I like to call the standard atrocious diet, the SAD, there's really no forewarning. And people are just, everything surrounds food, social, holidays, when you're out with coworkers, business meetings, it's food, food, food. And a lot of restaurant foods all have the canola, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, palm oil that they're cooked in. People say, oh, well, I don't eat seed oils. Well, maybe you don't go to the grocery store and buy a bottle of Crisco, but sure enough, if you're eating standard food, anything pretty much that comes in a box, a bag, a bottle, or a jar is going to have these toxic oils, which really take about over 6 years to clear out of your system when you stop. And I see you just pulled out Dr. Kenobi's amazing book, The Ancestral Diet Revolution. I love it because one of my passions as an eye doctor, and also my own father, suffered very debilitating vision loss from macular degeneration because I couldn't convince my own parents to do this crazy way of life. And nobody wants to believe me that you have to stop eating mayonnaise and salad dressing and not getting, fried calamari at the restaurant, because it's all so incredibly toxic. It stores in your body. And if anybody, listens to Dr. Kenobi's presentations, that there's many of them on YouTube now, and his amazing book, and he's got a great website, cureamd.org. It's all for him trying to devote his time and knowledge to spread it, that people understand that he's 1000% convinced it is from seed oils. That's the thing in the last 100 years that has so exponentially increased, that has been causing really the downfall of our population.
Yeah, he does such a convincing job in this book as well. We were fortunate enough to host him again So he could come on and kind of explain, the things that he had discovered with all his research, which is years and years and years he's been researching this. And he makes a really compelling case in that book that it is the seed oils and not necessarily the sugar. And it's a really interesting point. And we can get caught up in semantics and to try to determine which one it is. They flow together. If you're having one, you're going to have the other. And I was just talking to a sugar addiction specialist not long ago, Tia Reed, who came on our show, and I said, okay, here's the deal. If you tell me cocaine and heroin are addictive, I don't really have a problem, because at this stage of my life, like, I don't have a guide. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where to find it. It's probably around somewhere, but I can't really get it. If you tell me sugar is addictive, there's a huge problem, because I can find it everywhere at every store. Yesterday at the park at 10:30 in the morning, a food truck pulls up and parks and starts setting up donut kebabs. Whatever the hell donut kebabs is can't be great. It's delicious, amazing, incredible food that is poisoning everybody. And you can find it. It's everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's why I find that I know a few people who have really resolved themselves of drug addiction, cigarette addiction, alcohol addiction, and a bulimic heavy food addiction. And they said by far the other three were so simple compared to the food addiction. And it's really because there's triggers everywhere. I mean, you walk into a grocery store, before you get two steps into the very first door that opens up, from floor to ceiling, there's the jalapeno kettle chips, the crispiest you'll ever have, and then the other thing is the bakery's got a whole display wafting the aroma of the baked goods. And it's like you don't have a fighting chance at this point when you're an addict, so it's really difficult. And that's why I'm very strongly in favor of having groups and having community, because it's so not easy to do this by yourself, because your friends and family, they're all like laughing and enjoying the food and just having fun. And, it's not until you potentially get into your 50s, 60s, 70s, where it really has now struck you. If you're lucky enough to have gotten obese from it, or gotten a disease young enough, like Michaela Peterson, and you search for the answer soon enough, then you have a good shot of at least having. But most people are really at the point where you don't realize it, but you keep eating this stuff and eventually it's going to catch up. And most people say, oh, don't get old. This happens when you get old. And they accept these things as just kind of diseases of old age. And I say, no, I'm going to be hiking a mountain when I'm 70. Like, this is not appropriate. Arthritis is from inflammation. And we could say, so I do listen to his whole presentation about how he mainly has pinpointed it to seed oils and not specifically necessarily the sugar. But like you said, a lot of times it goes hand in hand. It's the churros and the cookies. It's like, it's fat and sugar, right? And that's the combination of salt, fat, and sugar makes things so incredibly addictive. Aside from the fact that they have addiction specialists on staff at these food companies to purposely do this, it's really kind of crazy. But I think that sugar itself is inflammatory and addictive. And whether it's the seed oils actually causing the cellular damage, which there's some real powerful graphics that you could look at and watch and see that when these seed oils get into the wall of our cellular membrane and disrupt it and inflame it, and the fact that they stay there for so long, it's got a half-life of like I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I forget now. I keep hearing different numbers.
660 days or something.
Yeah, and basically 6 years down the road, if you stop eating it today, 6 years, you pretty much have a pretty good shot of having most of it cleared out. But
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. This is the most tagged video on our show, but we'll tag it again. It'll be in the show notes. The How It's Made TV series that did the episode that had the segment on canola oil. When you watch this, set. It is a horror show. You think this beautiful golden, bottle in plastic at the grocery store came from this like pristine source. Like, no, it didn't. It's a bunch of sludge that's been chemicalized and heated to ultra high sources. It's a nightmare. It's a toxic nightmare.
And it's so unassuming that we are just randomly, I sit there and I watch all these people eating French fries and onion rings, and I look and I'm like, oh, they just don't know. They do not know that that was just deep fried in this toxic sludge, and they're putting it in, and not only at that meal, but every day. And it's in everything, unless you're eating a really clean whole foods diet, it's really in everything. And, when I'm at restaurants now, like, even if you think you're getting a healthy pan-seared salmon, on the menu, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to stay away from the fried seafood, and I'm going to stay, I'm just going to order. Well, they squirt that oil in the pan before they set your salmon in it and flip it. Why? Because it has a high heat smoking point. So they like to cook with it. It does a good job at crisping up, which the texture, that's what the chef likes to see, that nice brown edge. And because it's gone through this 8-stage chemical process, it's pretty much odorless and flavorless. So it's not imparting a strong flavor onto the food. And so you think that you're at a restaurant, even high-end restaurants, getting a nice piece of salmon. Well, I tell them when I order even a steak, I say, can you please tell them I cannot eat any oil? I even go so far saying I'm allergic to oils. They can't use any oil on my food. And I say they can use as much butter or bacon grease as they want, but I can't have oil. And that's really the best way to get around, because people are like, well, what's the deal? I can't go out and eat at restaurants anymore. Well, it's pretty tough, but there's actually an app on the phone now that is to locate restaurants in their seed oil use or their seed oil non-use. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'll look up the name of it, and then just let you know, just because somebody might be interested. Let me just see.
Yeah, we'll tag that in the notes too.
Seed Oil Scout. It's a free app. Seed Oil Scout. SOS is the cute little emblem for it there. The graphic. Seed Oil Scout. SOS. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
okay. Amazing.
I always try to spread any information that I can to help people to avoid this toxic stuff. But the most important thing is getting people to really understand that simple little, Kraft Italian dressing that people are marinating their chicken in when they grill it and pouring on their salads. It's so unhealthy. It's so horribly toxic to our bodies. And people don't know. They just don't know.
Yeah, that's why we so appreciate your passion and people like Dr. Kenobi and their passion to share this message. Thank you for the app recommendation. That's fantastic. We'll make sure we link that in the notes. A few things I kind of wanted to get to today. You have been a carnivore for a long time, and I wanted to know what things basically kind of got you there. I also want to talk about a recent experience where you and I actually got to meet in person, which was lovely, in KetoCon in Austin, which was such a great time. You were on a panel discussion that I found fascinating. I would love to get your input on some of that stuff. Before we get to those things, I do want to ask you, can you remind our audience when you started to learn that these things were a true problem for you? I know you did suffer through a pretty severe sugar addiction. When did you start to learn that sugar was a problem, seed oils were a problem, and you might need some type of alternative diet to help make you feel healthier?
Yeah, well, Casey, for me, I got to say it was a 30 years of struggling and not understanding. I had no idea at that way back when I was in my teens and 20s that this was literally an addiction. Like, I had no clue. All I knew was that I had a hard time eating one cookie, and I could never eat half a cupcake. And if, my mom made lasagna and the lasagna was so good, I wanted a second piece. And I don't know what causes it in some people to be much worse than in others. If you listen to Joan Iflin, she's an authority on food addiction. I think her statistic is like 88% of the population has some form of sugar carb addiction. And it's interesting because even like people who I'll just talk to a random friend and we're chatting about stuff and you know, I'll bring up like, yeah, I don't eat sugar anymore. And they're like, not even fruit. And I go, no, because fruit triggers the craving for sweet. And I have no reason to put fruit in my body. It's glucose, fructose, and sucrose is in a piece of fruit. And it really is inflammatory and is really not healthy. The fruit that we have these days are genetically modified to be big sugar bombs. And so, and then they're like, well, they said, well, they don't have a problem with sugar. And then as the conversation went on, but they're like, oh, but yeah, I eat my chocolate every day. It's like, you eat chocolate every day. Okay. So it's just interesting when you really kind of think to yourself what your habits are. And it could be even something as simple as like morning cereal, because that stuff, those grains and the cereals, they just convert right into sugar as soon as you're eating it. And it's not necessarily just, you know, ice cream and donuts. It's also bread and cereal and chips. And so it's pretty widespread. But for me, I just could not figure out how to stop being so driven to keep eating it and binging on it. And I suffered for so long. And I finally, thank God for, by the time the computers and the internet, because this is way back, and well, 2009 was when I finally found my answer, when I came across, while I was web surfing one night on March 9th of 2009, I came across this group called Zeroing In on Health, because I did know as time went on, like maybe a few years before that, I did realize that if I eliminated, quote unquote, sugar and flour from my diet, that I was so much better off, right? But then I'd have a bag of dried apricots. And well, of course, this is paleo and this is okay. It's fruit, it's natural, it's from nature, right? But I would eat that like candy. And I'd clean strawberries for my kids, a quart of strawberries. Every other one went in my mouth. I'm like, what's going on here? There's still something wrong. So yeah, it was when I came across this group that they were a little thread on a low carb forum, and they were people who said, wow, we did so great on the Atkins induction phase, which I haven't actually really researched and done the whole Atkins thing, but I think the first 2 weeks, this induction phase is literally carnivore. And so this was a group that said, they feel so great doing it. Why do we have to stop and start climbing the carb ladder, I guess, like the instructions are? And they formed their own group. Charles Washington, I credit really him for my discovery of this whole thing. And they started, you know, we would discuss books like Fat of the Land and Not by Bread Alone. And we actually did, like, you know, a lot of scientific discussions, because we were a group of very inquisitive people that were there for all different reasons. Some women with eating disorders that were resolved, and that's what perked me up. I'm like, yeah, I definitely have an eating disorder. Let's jump in and try this. And I did, before I even waited, because I wasn't going to wait for a study to show me that this was healthy and safe. All I knew was that there was people in there who resolved themselves of this addiction, and I was all in immediately. Because if you know what it's like, you know, eating in secret and hoarding food and eating in your car and getting in your car to go drive to get it. I mean, this is a very serious, you know, I'm going to say debilitating, because it changes so many aspects of your life, and aside from it being so unhealthy. But I think that when I started and said to myself, well, it's going to kill me one way or the other. Either I'm going to kill myself with this, you know, binge eating problem, or with this carnivore zero carb diet. I was like, I don't know. It was a tough one. And then as I kept doing it and feeling better and better and reading more and more, I'm like, holy crap, this not only is this my answer, but it's actually what everybody should be doing. This is the optimal way to health. This is how we get our body to heal, by getting out of its way, by not putting any of this toxic food. And then it's cognitive dissonance. You have to like say, well, of course, vegetables are good for you, right? You have to have vegetables. It's like, well, no, we're actually learning there's, you know, phytates and lectins and oxalates. And I'm like, I don't have to eat my veggies. And then somebody were like, oh, but I love my salad. I'm like, yeah, you know what you love? You love the salad dressing. You love the bacon on the salad. You like the grated cheese on the salad. And you like the grated carrots that are sugary because there's a lot of sugar in carrots. Okay. This is what you like about your salad. And think about it and just eat a piece of plain lettuce. Like, how good is that? How much are you loving that? Right. So, it really has to be where you have to have your own personal why that makes you cry, because most people aren't going to listen to this and be going about their life all fine and say, wow, let me listen to what this crazy lady's saying, how healthy this is, and dig in and do it. Why? Because it's so tough socially at the beginning, and it's tough for yourself. Like, I couldn't imagine going out to breakfast and not having my toast or my toasted bagel with it. And it's like really difficult to really wrap your brain around the fact that this stuff is not healthy. Grains are not good for us. We should not be eating grains. So yeah, that's pretty much my long-winded story about really how I got into this. It was my own personal struggle. And now it's my own, I'm just so passionate to try to help anybody and everybody out there who's suffering with, whether it's just coming to this because of severe arthritis or diabetes or, weight issues, and there's mental issues, depression, anxiety, bipolar that can be cured with this. And so it's almost like I got to the point where I just wanted to scream it from the rooftops and just shake everybody. Like, you got to understand that there's so much that people are like, the Italians go, well, I'm Italian, I got to eat pasta. I got to have pasta and bread. And I'm like, yeah, no, you don't. And then they're always so quick to say, well, so-and-so lived to 100 and they ate, whatever. But yeah, I guess you have to just really think for yourself where you're at on your own health journey. Are you off, not on any medication, have no diagnosis, and at a fairly metabolically healthy, lean body weight? And if that's all going for you and you're still eating bread, I guess more power to you, but I would still say don't eat the seed oils.
Totally. Wow, I love that. So well explained, and I love hearing your story. This week, I started with a new carnivore client, the most ideal carnivore client I've ever started with. We did a 15-minute call. He talked to me. He asked me maybe 3 questions. He's like, well, I already like meat, so I guess I'll just start this tomorrow morning. It was that nonchalant about it. It was so easy. He's already down 3 pounds. He called me today and he had a few more questions and we were able to deal with it. And he hung up the phone and he texted me later and said, dude, thank you so much for your help. I'm so glad I saw your egg pictures on Facebook. I really appreciate this. Being down 3 pounds, my energy's good. I feel good. I don't feel like I'm getting keto flu or anything. I just messaged him back. I'm like, dude, this is why if you pay me $10 million right now, I would show up for all of my clients at 6 a.m. on Monday. I will never stop doing this. It's so fun to go from giving people advice that would never work and then blaming people because they were so bad at following the advice and it wouldn't work for anybody, versus now I'm doing something and helping people and curing all kinds of crazy stuff. And it works for seemingly everybody. It's incredible. And it's why I am with you. I'm not willing to shut up about this.
Yeah, and I think part of the success of it is it's so satiating. You're not starving yourself. You're not depriving yourself, and you're allowed to eat, but you're not allowed to eat pasta and rice and bread, but you're allowed to eat. And people say, well, gosh, it's so restrictive. And I'm like, no, I said, I feel the most freedom I've ever felt from food in my life. Just the fact that, yeah, so there's things that I now no longer choose to eat these things because I know how inflammatory they are and how, basically disease causing so many of these things are. I don't have a problem with saying, well, I'd rather just have a ribeye tonight, or ground beef, or a slab of ribs, or some beautiful, chops, lamb chops, veal chops. I mean, there's so much variety, and people are like, don't you get bored eating meat every day? And I'm like, No. Are you bored standing in line at the pharmacy or bored waiting in the waiting room for your doctor? I'm not bored at all. I'm really not. This is like it's just beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I never get sick of steak and eggs for dinner. It's absolutely amazing. Okay, so you've done this for quite a while now, well, just over 14 years. I came across an article from one of my favorite people in the space. He was also at KetoCon 2023, Dr. Kevin Stock. I love his newsletter. I subscribe to very, very few newsletters, and his is one that I subscribe to. And he put out an article sometime last year that was 10 traits that he has observed of carnivores who have been carnivore for over 10 years. What kinds of things do they do? So I do have some questions from that list that I would love to ask you and see where you land on some of these things. But before we do, let me just ask you, like, how, in your opinion, have you been able to stay carnivore for this long?
Wow, wow. It's because of how great I feel. I mean, I'm 58 and I work out at the gym. I do cartwheels on the beach. I'm hiking Mount Whitney, hopefully this August. Um, and I feel like I can do anything. And I have seen my parents' health deteriorate. I've seen my patients come in and they're, half of them are with a walker at the age of 70. And I'm like, that's not going to be me. So for me to stay on track with it's just like I can't imagine my life any other way because it's just amazing. I have energy. I don't have to deprive myself. I have a huge amount of variety, although after all this time, I get lazy and I just tend to enjoy eating similar things. Like you said, steak and eggs can just be a staple all the time. And when I'm hungry, having steak and eggs again, it's not boring. I just love it. So it's really again, I go back to having your why, because there's people with eczema and psoriasis and severe acne that totally get clear skin from this. Well, they have a pretty significant why that was making them cry. I mean, who wants to have all that scaly skin rash and disfigured cosmetically look and all that? So those people, you think, well, it's got to be easy for them to stay on track because when they go off track, they know where they're headed back to. So again, it really, and for some people, it could just solely be a weight issue. They don't want to carry 50, 60, 120 pounds. And surprisingly, some of them are not diabetic and don't have other health issues. Most of them do, but then everybody's got thyroid disease and type 2 diabetes, and they're just trying to resolve even hypertension and get off medication, because it's not a normal state for us to be diseased and have to take prescription medications. It's such an abnormal state for our bodies. Our bodies want to heal. So we're here to evolve. And it's, our whole genetic makeup is driven toward healing. You get a virus, your body heals it. Bacteria, your body heals it. A cut, your body heals it. It's like you have, but not if you got a ton of seed oils and sugar and grain in your body. That's why people say, well, you're going outside a lot. Aren't you afraid of skin cancer? You spend a lot of time in the sun. And I'm so proud to say that I really don't use sunscreen unless there's, very few circumstances if I'm out in a boat with no shade or out on the beach for hours and hours. And then I use a very specific beef tallow based non-toxic sunscreen. But in general, we want the sun on our skin and in our eyes. And people don't understand that. And well, oh, I have a family history of, skin melanoma. I was like, well, you know what? My dad had skin melanoma too, but I'm still out there. Why? My dad ate mayonnaise and salad dressing and garbage. And that is what causes inflammation in your skin and causes like mutations to end up being cancer. Could this kick me in the butt? And then sometime at some point I get skin cancer. I guess we're all susceptible because we have environmental toxins too in the air, in our water. There's things that we can't really control. And then, we could go down the rabbit hole of EMF, and I shouldn't be wearing a Apple Watch, and I try not to use my AirPods anymore, but we could go on and on of different things that can cause problems with our body. But for the most part, I got to say, going back to your original question, this is very simple and straightforward for me, just because I feel so much benefit and I know so strongly how this is potentially going to prevent disease.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think last time we talked, we both lamented that we have amazing sunglass collections that we never get to use, but you did give me permission to use them in the car, so I feel better. So thank you for
Yeah,
that. I also
definitely in the
figured that, yeah, that's fine. And I figured that both of us probably had to put a shirt on to be able to do this interview. I'm always shirtless in the summertime. I know you are always in your bikini anyway, doing your cartwheels.
Yeah, you got
So
to get as
I had
much
to
sun. Yeah.
had to dress a little bit more formal for this. Okay, so according to Kevin Stock, the number one reason that he, or the number one thing that he notices about people who've been carnivore for over 10 years, the number one thing is the why. If you understand your why, that seems to be really common throughout. So I'm glad you answered that question. I'm going to pick a few other things off this list and just hear what your thoughts are. I'll go right to cheats. Like, how many times in 14 years have you gone off the diet?
Well, for me, it was back when my kids were little and we would go to a peach and nectarine orchard in our town. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to at least be able to just have, a little. And I just very quickly found when I tried to have half a nectarine, I would have ended up eating two by the end of the day. And then the next day, I'm looking at it and smelling them and seeing which one I want again. So it was that stray cat that once you start feeding it, it just keeps coming back. And then that's when I said, there's just no moderation for me. I need to be abstinent. I need to look at every sweet like that. I mean, maybe some people can have some raspberries and blueberries, and that's great. If that's where you halt it and stop and you're healthy, then I don't see anything wrong with it. But for me, cheating really just meant cheating myself and cheating my health. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I just remember the horrible days of in my addiction where I would pull together like a week or two and be like, all right. And then I'd be in the ditch again. And then I'd pull myself out and I'd be okay for another few days. And then in the ditch again, I'm like, you have to realize that these cheats end up being a slippery slope down to where you don't want to be, because heck, this is the whole point of this, is getting away from that addiction and getting away from the draw of eating food that's really not healthy.
Yeah. When I'm talking to somebody about this, I may even concede to them. Like, let me just give it to you that fruits are more healthy. I don't agree with that, but let me just concede that to you. My problem is if I had a quote unquote healthy fruit, it's not necessarily the fruit itself, it's everything after that. That would make me so hungry. And then I would go eat all kinds of stuff that I really didn't want to be eating. And the fruit, like you said, was the trigger. So regardless of whether or not it's healthy or not, debate it if you like, but it's just you're reintroducing that sweet food. It's going to make me very hungry, and I will go eat a lot of stuff that I really shouldn't be eating. So that's nice. So again, remembering your why, it's easy for you to kind of stay on, and you don't really get off very often. I think that's great. Another thing that he talked about in this list was coffee. Where are you on coffee on a carnivore diet?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question, because I used to be a coffee drinker through college, grad school, even years and years into it. Because who doesn't, people who are into coffee, which think it's a crazy amount, the statistic of the percentage of the population that's addicted to caffeine is so high. But so here's my thing with coffee. So about 4 years into carnivore, I was still having my cup of coffee in the morning. I wasn't like a crazy coffee drinker, but I had my coffee in the morning. And then I got to the point where I thought to myself, I don't want to be addicted to anything. And I got to get up and have this cup, because if you don't, the next day you're going to get a little headache. You're going through withdrawal from the drug. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Why do I keep putting this drug in my body just to have to keep putting it in? And so I made the decision. I was like, all right, I'm going to switch to decaf. And I drank decaf for years. And not that decaf's really any better because of the decaffeination process. And there's still caffeine in decaffeinated coffee and all this. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just, happy I was off the caffeine. And then fast forward to really just a couple years ago, when I started listening and reading more and more. I mean, there's a book called The Caffeine Blues. I have some really good articles regarding caffeine and its detrimental effects, and raises your triglycerides. It totally messes up your cortisol and your adrenals. The hormones get messed up, your sleep gets messed up. And it is really, it's got like 700 biochemical components to it aside from the caffeine. And you have to think about it. You are literally bathing your microbiome in this. It's not good for your microbiome. So anybody with leaky gut, autoimmune issues, you really should be drinking water. And so I am, I realize nobody wants to give up their coffee. And I'm going to say the people out in this space who are promoting it and making videos about the benefits of coffee, and it's a psychotropic drug. It's not, you know, you got to call a spade a spade. But these people that are cherry picking some of these studies that might be funded by the coffee bean industry, let's get that straight, because this is a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry. I don't even know. But you have to remember that these people are addicted themselves to, I call them, they're on the bean. They're addicted, and they're going to, of course, try to really preserve keep their addiction. And so I am, I tell people, try it, just give it up for 6 months and tell yourself you can go back to it. And I say the other thing is, you really need to have a substitute, because we love the ritual of it. We love the aroma of it. We love the warmth of it. And so I have a lot of my clients do what I call the hot nog drink, which is a couple tablespoons of butter, put some boiling water, take a rechargeable frother and stick it in there and froth it up, and then add a couple raw egg yolks, keep frothing, and it gets this beautiful, luscious, foamy hot drink. And that's a nice substitute. At the beginning, maybe even pour in a touch of some decaf coffee and get yourself off of really the whole caffeine first. And then you can do things like hot broth, hot salty water. If you put Redmond seasoned salt in some hot water in a little Yeti mug, it's like a very delicious. Oh, and then whisk a tablespoon of butter in that. It's amazing. So it's the mindset. It's really having a substitute. And honestly, hot water with a little wedge of lemon floating in it tastes just like herbal tea. And that's the other thing people say, well, what about tea? Well, tea is from a couple sources I've read and looked into, is worse than coffee, because it's tea leaves, and the leaves are the worst part of a plant. And the same thing, the coffee, it's not a bean, it's actually a seed. So here we go. This is a seed, right? And what are we doing? We're burning the seed, we're grinding it, we're pouring boiling water over it, and then we're drinking it multiple times a day, every day. So you got to just think long and hard. But I know people are like deer in the headlights when I start talking about stopping that. But that's not the first thing that needs to go. The sugar, the carbs, the seed oils, the processed foods, we have to take this in stages. And I don't pull the rug out from under people right away with the coffee. I just say, you know what, if you have certain issues that we want to resolve, we have to think about doing this. And, if you want to make a change, you have to make a change. And the other thing too is that last 10% thing that people hold on so tightly, whether it's artificial sweeteners, and that's a whole other thing, or their caffeine, that last thing that they're like, oh, I can't imagine life without it. That's usually the one thing they most need to give up. And it's really just more of a personal decision.
Yeah, I notice with myself and a lot of people that I coach that the longer you're on carnivore, the easier that type of thing just kind of slips away. You just don't really need as much. The quantity goes down, or like you can skip days a lot easier. It just kind of becomes this thing that's like it doesn't grab you nearly the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the next one I wanted to talk to you about, salt and electrolyte solutions, electrolyte supplements. I find this fascinating. I notice an interesting pattern with carnivores. I've actually been meaning to talk to Emerald Hearn about this because she's been researching this, and you know how she is with research. If she researches something, she researches it.
Yeah.
It seems like when people get on to carnivore, they need salt and salty supplements and the packets that you dump in water. I don't need to name, I don't think, to anybody who's been in this space. But over time, it almost seems like the need of that goes down, or it's almost causing more harm than good. What do you recommend for salt intake for somebody that's been on a carnivore diet, especially if they've been adapted to it over time?
Yeah, the salt thing is so interesting because and I just kind of go back to my day one of finding zeroing in on health and this group of people. And I'm thinking, okay, wait, what do you mean? We just only eat meat here and eggs, like, and seafood a little, like, and fat, and okay. And I jump in and do it. Nobody was talking about salt and dumping electrolytes and having to have potassium and magnesium. Not at all. So everything was just no, I salted my food to taste. And some, like Stanley, the bear, he was carnivore for about 40 years and he had a lot of writings and he didn't use salt at all. And Charles Washington and Dana both don't use salt unless they're at a restaurant and the steak is salted. And so that's really interesting right there. They also talk about how salt can often drive you to eat more. And I would think about if I had a pound of ground beef cooking and I added salt to it to season it, or whatever, a little taco seasoning, basically salt and some spices, right? I could easily down the whole pound. But if it's totally plain with no salt, like literally nothing but the ground beef, it's amazing how your shut off is sooner and you don't eat as much because it's not quite as enticing. Picture potato chip with no salt versus a regular potato chip, like, to do that analogy, right? And it's very interesting. So I don't really have a strong opinion on it because I'm going to tell you this, through years and now being in this carnivore space just in the past couple of years, like, I've come out to discuss my story and how, yes, this is sustainable. Listening to all these people talk about leg cramps and they have to take it every day, or they get leg cramps, and some people get leg cramps and it's not helping their leg cramps. And I don't have an answer because I don't really think there's a definitive, way to answer that. There's no manual. Some people will say, well, because I could say, well, ancestrally, we're just eating meat. There's minerals and sodium in just the meat, right? But they'll say, oh, well, the crops are all depleted now of the proper nutrients, so the meat we're eating doesn't have as much, and that's why we need to supplement now. And all I can say is I still don't supplement to this day. I do not pour electrolytes in any drink. I just drink plain water.
Yeah, that's where I am with that too. I really appreciate that input. And it's interesting to see how those trends kind of evolve and how you've been able to witness that, what people were originally talking about when you got into this versus, down the line as people are trying different things or maybe selling different supplements or things like that. Like,
Yeah.
that's where I'm
And
a little bit wary of that kind of thing.
yeah. And then let's tap into this aspect of it, which kind of is more my forte here, is those packets usually are citrus lime, raspberry, chocolate mint. Okay. They've got stevia in it. They've got sweetener. And now you're pouring it into water. And now instead of just drinking plain bland water, you're getting a little fired up in the dopamine there because you got some sweet. And now all of a sudden people are drinking 2 of these, 3 of these a day because they need their electrolytes. Really? Why don't you just put an unflavored packet in there and tell me how many of those you drink? That's what I
Yeah.
want to know. And why are we, and not to put down any of these companies that are putting all these electrolytes out. I just don't see the need for me, and I'm giving my personal experience, to purchase the electrolytes and put it in my water every day. I just don't see it. I'm, then, and I guess the whole downfall of the whole carnivore movement, where it would have spread much bigger, like the keto movement, the downfall here is nobody's really making money off of telling you to eat meat, drink water, and get healthy. There's really not so much in there. So therein lies, the whole issue with that. But yeah, I think a lot of the electrolyte thing is they're sweetened.
Yeah. And I'm with you. I love and appreciate the companies that are providing, low carbohydrate alternatives for people. I love that KetoCon had the exhibition with lots of different food vendors and everything. I love that. I appreciate that. It's also kind of funny and a little awkward when you're in the main exposition area right next to it, and somebody like who was it? Was it maybe it was Dr. Baker, like bashing on all the products that were just like right on the other side of the partition, like a little awkward, but they're right. Like, it is a way to make money. And if you just take the simple advice, like you were saying, like you're pretty good. You don't really need to rely on a lot of those things. So I appreciate that input as well. So KetoCon, speaking of KetoCon, you were on a panel that was wonderful. I was looking forward to this the entire time. This was on Friday, pretty late in the afternoon, where everything in the conference was kind of winding down. It's been a long day, several hours, yet we go into this room, which is packed to the brim. 15 minutes before you guys started talking, I had to sit on the floor. I counted over 200 people in that room. Can you tell us a little bit about the panel that you were chosen to speak on? And then I've got some questions about long-term health and keto for women's hormones.
Yeah, so it was Judy Cho, Danny Conway, Dr. Elizabeth Bright, myself, and Laura Spath
Laura.
did the MC for it. Yeah, it was really interesting, because even with some of us with some differing views, because everybody's coming at this from a different angle. Like, you have Sally Norton, who's big on oxalates, right? You have Elizabeth Bright, who's really on the hormone aspect of it. And she's very insistent that you not fast and you eat butter, you got to have enough fat and all that. And, that works for some people for certain situations. But it was really great that we could express our opinions on the panel and talk about it, because again, I keep going back to this. There's no manual. There's no definitive written out, this is how it goes. This is what works, and this is what's going to fix you, right? Because there's all sorts of different conflicting issues of where people have come from. I mean, some people have been exposed, unbeknownst to them, to a high amount of mold, and they have mold toxicity because their bodies aren't able to process it, which is called CIRS, C-I-R-S, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And there's people who have such bad leaky gut and inflammation that they're having a hard time healing, because that kind of thing has to heal. Like, you have all these loose, junctions, and you got to get them so that we're not having issues with, there's people with IBS and Crohn's and gluten intolerance and celiac and you name it. And these things aren't going to reverse on a dime. And I tell people, don't expect this to be a quick fix scheme. It's not a quick fix weight loss scheme. It's not a quick fix, it's going to fix everything in a month thing, because I have people, they're 65 years old and they go, I'm so frustrated. I've been on this for 6 months and I still have X, Y, or Z. I'm like, really? Well, you just had 60 years of treating your body like a trash can with the food you were putting in, and now 6 months of clean eating, you want the ship to be reversed. And I said, you just have to keep going with it. Are there any positive benefits that are happening? Like, oh yeah, I sleep better and I got this and this is better and I got great energy, but I want to get off my high blood pressure meds. Okay, well,
give it a minute.
Yeah. I said, you're just a little blip on the radar right now of what you've been doing to help your body out. I said, you gotta keep running down the road here.
That's amazing. I love that. So, okay, so what concerns do you personally have about women and their hormones and being on the carnivore diet? What things would you want a woman to know if they choose to do a carnivore diet? What things should they be looking out for? Should they have no concerns? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, and this is gonna, I don't know whether it's gonna be something like you're not gonna like my answer, or people are gonna be again looking for the answer, right? But here's my answer. Our bodies are so exquisitely engineered to be healthy and get healthy. All right. I kind of sailed through menopause. I'm not on any hormone replacement. I I just think that if we're eating the proper way and we're eliminating all of those toxic foods, and we couldn't even include plants, because for many people, even plants are not appropriate food. And that's one of the things that people are just so they can't wrap their brain around, no vegetables and fruit. But if you get to your health level and still include them and you're doing fine, then I'm not here to be dogmatic about anything. But I'm going to say, if you really want to give yourself the best chance of resolving any and all issues you have, go down to a pure carnivore way of eating and then reintroduce one thing at a time. So hormonally, yeah, there's so much Hashimoto's, thyroid disease, women with horrible menopause symptoms and all that. And there's, on that women's panel, there's some up there who very strongly promote a period of supplementation to support the changes that need to happen. And there's a whole little subset of blood work and things to do. So I'm not poo-pooing that, and I'm not saying it's not necessary. I'm just saying in my circle, in my world, it really comes down to, are you willing to make the effort, do the work, make the change to at least even try a 3 or 6 month period of doing a complete strict carnivore way of eating. And then let's talk about what's improved, what hasn't improved, and then do you potentially need some sort of supplementation that might get you somewhere a little bit faster. But yeah, I'm just so not, I guess I'm like so simple. Less is better. Eat meat, lift weights. So I say lift weights, eat steaks, and really all will be good. And
I love that.
give up the damn coffee too.
Love that. One of my key takeaways from that conversation was, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, that we squabble a lot about whether this is high fat or high protein. And the kind of point being is like, it should be kind of high both. It should be high fat and high protein. Do you agree, disagree with that? I'm not sure. I don't think it was you that said that, but
Yeah, so here, there's a lot of variation on that, because there's people in this, and that's why I even made a YouTube video on conflicting information. And that's the title of the video, because I tried to hit on, the only thing I missed in that video was the electrolyte one, but I hit upon a lot of different ones, fasting, no fasting, like a lot of these different supplements, no supplements, all of this. It's very difficult because you're so unsure of what you're doing to begin with, because this is so unusual in this world that we live in, right? To eat this way. But I just think that, yeah, the conflicting information makes it, I think, the toughest. I really do. From everything that I keep hearing from people who come into my groups are like, I don't know what to do. And they're like, I was doing great and I was dropping weight. And then all of a sudden I heard I had to eat 2 sticks of butter a day. And then I put on weight, and, and it's like, oh gosh, and I tell people, just try to follow a small subset of people who you feel like you trust and can relate to, and don't get too involved in too much of this, because you will get so much conflict in your brain. Yeah, you definitely need enough protein. What's enough? All these terms are subjective, right? You definitely need enough fat. can't have low fat. It was not satiating. You won't have energy. Okay, well, what's low fat? Again, this subjective term, right? So, if we want to quantify it, you could say on any given day, you should never eat less than 30 to 40 grams of fat. I mean, that's really low, but that is really helpful maybe a couple days a week to pull down the calories to help somebody lose weight. Because ultimately, and I know this is the other conflicting message out there, because there's some messages that say B, 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 and E, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs, eat as much as you want till you're comfortably full and you won't gain weight. Well, guess what? This girl can gain weight doing that, because I can eat a 1.5 pound ribeye with some, bacon and some eggs, and I'm not staying down at my lean body weight. It just doesn't happen. So therein lies, there's conflict, right? Because this person's saying eat all you want, and this one's saying, you know what? Calories actually do matter. It's energy in versus energy out. Now, granted, it is the type of calories that are coming in that make a huge difference, that we're not eating carbs, we're getting enough protein, we're getting enough fat, and we're satiated. Because without that, this is never going to be sustainable unless you're satiated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so well said. I love, the more and more I go to these conferences, the more I'm loving the panel discussions. And I appreciate that people have differences of opinion. Like at Low Carb Denver 2023, there were 5, people that are experts on the heart, cardiologists, whatever. They had different opinions about statins. And it's like, that's okay. Like, I want there to be differences of opinions, and let's talk this out. And this is the place, this is the perfect spot to be able to do that. So there were things that were said that I didn't necessarily agree with, but at the end of the day, I did appreciate your input, and I appreciated having that discussion and learning from each of you and your own different viewpoints. And like you said, everybody has their own kind of shtick and their own kind of specialty, and that can all be valid, and you need to find the right people that are going to help the individual become healthy, and that might be different for everybody. You already mentioned your groups. We both kind of share a history of working with groups on like temporary 2 and 3 month kind of weight loss and fat loss programs. Tell us about the group you have going on.
Yeah, so I really have very strong opinion on that. Addictions love isolation, and community is the opposite addiction. And I have so many people in the groups who have really told me, it'll bring tears to my eyes, because I was just reading last night, because we just finished the May group, and these people writing saying, you literally have changed my life. And that, with the knowledge that I gained from this, the support that I felt from this, in between the weekly Zoom live meetings, I have everybody connected in a private WhatsApp chat, and they can share recipes and ideas and experiences. And it just becomes more of a way of life that feels totally doable, as opposed to feeling isolated and keep slipping in the damn ditch. Because, that's one thing. If you keep relapsing, then there's no recovery. So, so my group, so right now, since I did this group that had such great success with weight loss, because I had everybody testing their glucose and their ketones every day, that got sent to me through Bluetooth, or through synced, through their Bluetooth app. And I had them do a challenge every week, and we had kind of like an assignment, and they had options in it. And people were losing 16 pounds, 11, 12. And some of them were like disappointed. I only lost 11 pounds. I'm like, what? You lost 11 pounds in a month. Let's just celebrate that, because you know what? If you do that for 5 more months, then you're down 66 pounds. So we're not so unhappy with that, right? And they're like, yeah, no. But yeah, so I wanted to run a summer, June, July, August, because it was so clear to me that this is really helpful to have group support in doing this. And that, it became just a big motivation of mine to put the work in to have these groups, because I love really hearing the successes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so by the time this episode drops, your June group would have already started. But you told me offline it's not too late if somebody wants to join in.
Yeah, so I just have it so that you can pretty much jump in at any point. So, July and August, just August, it all will work. And then more than likely, because we'll see how this summer goes with it, but I will probably do an October, November, December one, because that's what I call the excuse trifecta. It starts Halloween, Thanksgiving, and then the Christmas holiday season. And it's a big food fest, drinks and food. And unless you really concentrate on the fact that, do you want to do that again? Do you want to feel like garbage again, New Year's Eve, and say, all right, now I got to get back on my diet? You shouldn't be going back on any diet. You should have your steady state of how you eat, how you nourish yourself, and not fall in the ditch. And that's why, so yeah, the October, November, December one will be the, I might even call it the excuse trifecta. We have no excuse. I'm going to get people, walking through this whole thing. I try to encourage everybody to lift at least twice a week. It's so important that we keep our muscle strength up. And then the third big factor is this whole food thing, and staying away from the triggers, having a plan ahead, eat before you get to a party so you're not starving and choose the wrong foods, or bring your own sausage cheese balls and bacon wrapped scallops and do bacon knots. I have, YouTube video on that, and people at the party will love it, and you'll have something to eat. It's all in being prepared. And again, being in a group has been really just so much of a game changer for people that I feel like I don't know if I'll ever stop them.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that. That is my favorite excuse to shut down. I'll have my clients sit down and actually write down the days that they have parties or social events. It's like 4 things. It's something in Thanksgiving, it's your work party, maybe 1 or 2 family parties. It's like 4, it's not even the whole day. So have strategies, like you said, like you don't have to go full send downhill for 3 months and start January having gained 20 or 30 pounds. You're going to hate it. Like, just find strategies.
But here's the thing. It's that little addictive brain in the head that says, all right, it's holiday time. What the heck? You only live once. Or somebody's like, oh, Mrs. Jones made her famous crumb cake and it's still warm. And you're like, and it's just like, well, it's the holidays. I'll just get back on track. And it's just the excuse to that you make for yourself, because why? Because you want to jump back in and eat that stuff. And it's, again, it comes down to, you have to have that why. I tell people to journal. What's your 3 main reasons? Some people are just like, I want to be able to get down on the ground and back up and play with my grandkids. I want to be able to bike with them. I want to be able to, and it really has to be where you have to keep totally up in the top of your head exactly why you're doing this and why you don't want to go back in the ditch again.
Yeah. Yep, I totally agree with that. I love that. This has been such a fun conversation. That's such a great way to end this conversation. I've taken up a lot of your time. We had a technical difficulty probably on my end before this call started. So it was a good 15, 20 minutes of kind of fuddling around and not being able to hear me on Zoom. But if you don't mind, could you tell people where they can go to find you, to connect with you and your work?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, Carnivore Doctor. You can find me there. I go live every week and do either Q&As or topics. Either I did a macular degeneration, a dry eye. Sometimes I do a whole cooking demo, and I have a 10 ways to tackle your cravings. I kind of do a whole different variety of things. And other than that, carnivore-doctor.com is my website, and you'll be able to get to I do limited private one-on-one coaching, and I have my groups where you can get all the information for that there. And I'm going to be writing.
Awesome.
I'm in the process of attempting to write a book. So
what? I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Might as well. What the heck?
What the heck? Yeah, you don't have anything else going on. You might as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just like that. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's amazing. I will definitely look forward to that. Lisa, I always enjoy spending time with you. You have such a great way of making all of this accessible and simple. Not that it's easy for everybody, but it can be simple. And at the end of the day, I tend to think you can stay on this pretty easily for a very long time because the food is delicious. And again, people like you make it accessible for people out there. So thank you so very much for being so generous with your time. I love being able to meet you in person in Austin. And
Yeah,
thanks for taking.
hopefully next year we'll be in Austin again.
Absolutely. I would love it. That would be great. But anyway, thank you so very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.